Nobody consulted Todd Monken's PR team before that press conference. Nobody handed him a script, told him to be careful with his words, or warned him that what he was about to say would send shockwaves through the entire NFL. He just walked up to that podium, looked directly into the cameras, and told the world exactly what he sees when he watches Shedeur Sanders operate. And what he said was not vague, it was not diplomatic, it was not the kind of carefully hedged coach speak that reporters translate into nothing. It was precise, detailed, and pointed in one direction. If you were listening closely, really listening, you already know that the Cleveland Browns quarterback competition has a frontrunner, and his name has been the same since the moment that draft pick was made. The question now is not whether Shedeur Sanders can win this job. The question is how long the rest of the league is going to pretend this race is still wide open. We are going to break down exactly what Monken said, why every single word of it matters, what it means for the other quarterbacks in that building, and why this moment is far more significant than most analysts are giving it credit. Because what happened at that podium was not just a routine off-season press conference, it was a head coach laying the foundation for his franchise quarterback. And if you were paying attention, you already see it. There is a specific word that Todd Monken used when describing Shedeur Sanders, and once you understand what that word means at the NFL level, everything else about this situation becomes crystal clear. The word was decisive. That might sound ordinary to a casual fan. Quarterbacks are supposed to be decisive. Of course they are. But here is what that word actually means when a head coach uses it in the context of a quarterback evaluation during an off-season program. Decisive means the ball is coming out on time. Decisive means the quarterback is identifying the coverage before the snap, processing the defense post-snap, and delivering the football to the correct location before pressure has a chance to disrupt the play. Decisive means the quarterback is not standing in the pocket hoping something opens up downfield. He is already committed to his decision before the pocket even begins to collapse. That is not a small thing. That is the single most important quality that separates quarterbacks who win consistently in this league from quarterbacks who pile up yards in garbage time and disappear when the game is on the line. Processing speed is the one trait that cannot be installed through repetition alone. You can teach footwork, you can correct mechanics, you can adjust release points, but you cannot coach a quarterback into seeing the field faster than he naturally does. Either the game slows down for a player at this level, or it does not. And Todd Monken just stood in front of every camera in Cleveland and told the world that the game is slowing down for Shedeur Sanders in real time. Think about what that actually means coming from this specific coach. Monken has built elite offenses everywhere he has gone. College programs, NFL organizations, championship stages. He has worked with quarterbacks at every level of football, and he knows exactly what he is looking at when he evaluates one. He does not throw compliments around to make young players feel comfortable. He does not speak in platitudes at press conferences to generate good vibes during the offseason. When Todd Monken goes into specific detail about a quarterback's development, it is because he has watched enough reps to be certain about what he is seeing. And what he is seeing in Shedeur Sanders is clearly making him very confident about what this offense can become. The ball is coming out faster, the decisions are sharper, the processing is ahead of schedule, and the head coach of the Cleveland Browns went on record saying all of it. That is not a coincidence. That is a coach who is building public trust in the player he intends to build around. Pay very close attention to this part, because sometimes the most revealing thing a head coach does at a press conference is not what he says, it's what he does not say. Monken did not stand at that podium and describe Deshaun Watson rediscovering his rhythm. He did not praise Watson's experience or suggest that his veteran presence gives him an edge in a competition like this. He did not talk about Gabriel making a jump or showing something unexpected during the off-season program. He talked about Shedeur, specifically, in detail, with the kind of precision that only comes from someone who has been watching closely and is genuinely impressed by what he is observing. When evaluators single out one player in a competition by name and describe his development with surgical accuracy, that is not neutral, that is a signal. Coaches at this level understand how their words land publicly. They understand that when they describe one quarterback's decisiveness, quick release, and football processing in a room full of reporters, every person in that room is writing the same headline. Monken knew exactly what he was doing, and he did it anyway, because sometimes the most effective way to communicate your intentions is to describe your ideal quarterback so specifically that everyone already knows who you were talking about. The absence of Watson's name in those comments is not accidental. It is the whole point. Some people looked at that press conference and decided to frame it as evidence of uncertainty. They pointed to the fact that no starter was officially named and declared that the competition was still completely open. That reading is not just wrong, it is a deliberate misinterpretation of what actually happened. A reporter pushed Monken directly on whether entering training camp without a named starter was a problem, and Monken shut that line of questioning down immediately. His response was straightforward. If he did not believe either quarterback could start and win games, then it would feel like a problem. It does not feel like a problem. Read that slowly and let it land properly. The head coach of the Cleveland Browns just publicly stated that he believes Shedeur Sanders is currently capable of starting and winning NFL football games. This is the same rookie quarterback that a significant portion of the league tried to dismiss on draft night. The same player that analysts questioned, that skeptics doubted, that critics insisted was not ready for this stage, and the man who coaches him every single day just told the world he can start and win right now. That is not uncertainty. That is a head coach managing a competition process while already knowing where it ends. Monken is allowing the race to play out the right way. He is making sure Shedeur earns this in front of his teammates and coaching staff, rather than having it handed to him before a single padded practice has taken place. That is good coaching. That is how you build a locker room that respects the depth chart. But it does not change what Monken actually communicated about what he sees in this young quarterback. The process is continuing. The outcome is becoming clearer every single day. Now it is time to talk about the elephant in the room. Or more accurately, the $230 million elephant who spent last season on injured reserve and now is trying to walk back into a building where everything is changed. Deshaun Watson missed the entire previous season with an Achilles tear. That injury alone would be a significant hurdle for any quarterback trying to reclaim a starting job. But Watson's problems go far beyond the physical. Before that injury ever happened, Watson was already operating as one of the most ineffective quarterbacks in the NFL, despite carrying one of the largest contracts in league history. The Browns absorbed embarrassment after embarrassment during that stretch. The results on the field were catastrophic. The disconnect between the investment and the production was impossible to ignore. And now Watson is attempting to walk into a training camp environment where the head coach has just publicly described an entirely different quarterback archetype is the key to offensive success in this system. Here is the problem for Watson, and it is not a small one. The qualities that Monken praised are not qualities that Watson has ever been known for. Quick processing, fast release, getting the ball out before pressure arrives, eliminating negative plays, trusting reads and committing without hesitation. Watson's entire career has been built on the opposite approach. He holds the ball, he extends plays, he waits for something to develop downfield, and hopes his athleticism can bail him out when the pocket breaks down. That style has never been a consistent recipe for success at this level, and it is the direct opposite of what Monken just described as the most important traits his quarterback needs to have.
Watson is not walking into a quarterback competition where his skill set gives him a realistic path to the starting job. He is walking into a system that was defined by his head coach in a way that makes his natural tendencies a liability rather than an asset. That is an extraordinarily difficult position to compete from, and training camp is going to make that reality very visible very quickly once the pads go on and real defensive pressure arrives. There was a specific exchange during that press conference that did not get nearly enough attention, and it is the moment that truly exposed the gap between these two quarterbacks in Monken's mind. A reporter brought up comments that Deshaun Watson had made about quarterback responsibility in the new system. Watson had framed the system as complex and demanding, suggesting that the level of accountability placed on the quarterback was significant and implied that complexity could work against a younger player still learning the playbook. It was a subtle attempt to position his experience as an advantage, and Monken's response was ice cold. He did not nod and agree. He did not validate Watson's framing of the system as a challenge that favors veterans. What he did instead was pivot the entire conversation. He stated directly that what you ask a quarterback to do is determined by his capabilities. Let that sink in for a moment. He tied responsibility directly to capability. That means the level of control a quarterback receives in this system is not given based on years of experience or contract size or draft position. It is earned based on what a quarterback actually demonstrates he can handle in real time at the line of scrimmage. Watson's comments were essentially asking for sympathy for the complexity of the job. Monken's response was essentially saying that if a quarterback cannot handle the complexity, then the complexity gets removed from his plate. That is not a compliment to Watson. That is a direct, unspoken statement about what Monken believes Watson's limitations are. And every person in that press room understood exactly what was happening, even though Watson's name was never spoken out loud. Then Monken went further. He talked about quarterbacks who want the smoke. His exact point was that some quarterbacks crave complete control and full accountability because they trust their own reads, and they're willing to sit in the film room and explain every single decision if a play goes wrong. Others avoid that accountability because it is terrifying to own a bad decision in front of an entire coaching staff. The smoke is the ownership, the smoke is the responsibility, and Monken said his guys want it. Think carefully about which quarterback in that building was raised to own every decision on a football field. Think about which quarterback grew up in an environment where football IQ, accountability, and complete ownership of every play were non-negotiable expectations before you ever took the field. Shedeur Sanders was not just trained to be a quarterback, he was raised to be a leader who understands every assignment on the field, owns every result, and walks into the film room without flinching regardless of what happened on the previous drive. Deion Sanders did not raise a quarterback who deflects blame. He raised a quarterback who welcomes the pressure. Watson spent years in Cleveland making decisions that cost games and then finding ways to redirect the conversation away from his own accountability. The offensive line, the scheme, the receivers, the situation, anything but himself. That pattern is not compatible with the kind of quarterback ownership that Monken just described as a cornerstone requirement of his system, and Monken, without ever raising his voice or mentioning a name, made that incompatibility perfectly clear to everyone watching. Here is what makes Shedeur's situation even more remarkable. The praise is not coming exclusively from his head coach. Independent film analysts who have no allegiance to the Browns, no reason to generate hype around a rookie, and no agenda beyond breaking down what they actually see on tape are arriving at the same conclusions. One analyst who got access to practice footage made an observation immediately that speaks volumes. There were not many Shedeur clips available. Think about what that actually means in context. This was not a highlight reel carefully assembled by the Browns media team to make their quarterback look elite. This was raw practice footage with a limited number of Shedeur reps captured on camera, and even with that small sample, the analyst found enough to stop the film, point at the screen, and declare that what he was watching was genuinely impressive. That is meaningful. When an evaluator is impressed by a quarterback using a fraction of the available footage, it tells you something important about the quality of what that quarterback is doing on each individual rep. Shedeur is not padding numbers with easy completions to wide-open receivers. He is making the kind of throws and decisions that force analysts to pause the tape and examine what just happened.
The specific quality that jumped off the screen was Shedeur's willingness to attack the middle of the field. This is not a minor detail. This is a massive indicator of a quarterback's development and readiness for NFL-level football. The middle of the field is where quarterbacks get exposed. Safeties patrol it, linebackers read it. The windows are tighter. The timing requirements are more precise, and the consequences of a bad decision are immediate and painful. There is a reason young quarterbacks in this league spend years avoiding the interior of the defense. The risk feels too great. The margin of error is too small. Most developing quarterbacks work the sidelines in the short game until they build enough confidence to attack those interior windows. Shedeur is not waiting to build that confidence. He already has it. The analyst highlighted a specific throw in which Shedeur threaded a pass through multiple defenders in tight coverage, placing the ball precisely in a window that closed almost immediately after the ball left his hand. 3 defenders in the vicinity, tight coverage on the outside, and Shedeur delivered the football to a location where only his receiver could get it. That is not a lucky throw. That is not an accident of timing. That is a quarterback who has trained his eyes in his release to operate in sync at a speed that defenders simply cannot react to in time. But the throw itself is almost secondary to what had to happen before the ball ever left his hand. In order to deliver that pass with that precision in that window, Shedeur had to identify the coverage before the snap, process the defensive rotation after the snap, locate the receiver's route against the coverage, determine the exact timing of his release relative to the receiver breaking open, and then execute without any hesitation at all. All of that happened in seconds. All of that happened without any visible moment of doubt or recalculation. The decision was made and the ball was gone. That is what decisive actually looks like when you see it in real time. That is why Todd Monken keeps using that specific word, because he is watching it happen every single day, and he understands exactly what it means for the future of this offense. Everything about Shedeur Sanders' background points toward a player who was specifically prepared for exactly the situation he is now walking into. This is not a coincidence. This is not lucky timing. This is the result of a very intentional development process that most people in the media have consistently underestimated because they were too focused on the famous last name to actually examine what that upbringing produced. Deshaun Sanders is one of the most competitive and detail-oriented minds football has ever seen. When he decided to develop his son as a quarterback, he did not approach it the way most football parents approach youth development. He did not focus primarily on arm strength or physical tools. He focused on football intelligence, on ownership, on understanding every single assignment on the field before taking a snap, on processing the game so completely that the quarterback position becomes less about reacting and more about anticipating. Shedeur arrived in the NFL having been held to an extraordinarily high standard of football IQ for his entire development. He was expected to know the game, not just play it. He was expected to own every outcome, not explain it away. He was expected to walk into film rooms and defend every decision with a complete understanding of why he made it. That is the environment that shaped him, and that environment produced exactly the kind of quarterback that Todd Monken just described as his ideal. The accountability that Monken is demanding from his quarterbacks is not new information to Shedeur. It is the baseline he has been operating at since before he ever started a college game. The responsibility of changing protections at the line, owning the result when a play goes wrong, sitting in the film room and explaining every decision. None of that is unfamiliar territory. None of that is intimidating. It is simply the standard that was set for him long before Cleveland was ever in the conversation. That is the hidden advantage that statistics and highlight reels cannot fully capture. Shedeur Sanders is not entering this situation and trying to adapt to a new level of accountability. He is arriving already calibrated for it. He is walking into this competition already wired for exactly what the head coach is demanding, and that is an advantage that no amount of veteran experience can replicate, because it is not something you develop late in a career. It is something that gets built into a quarterback's foundation from the very beginning. Let's address the one remaining argument that skeptics keep coming back to: the pads, the real pressure, the real live contact, and the genuine defensive looks that will separate what looks good in shorts from what actually holds up when the hits start coming. Monken himself acknowledged this, honestly. He said there was still a lot to see once the pads come on and real pressure arrives, and that is a fair and reasonable statement from a coach who is doing his job properly. You cannot declare a starting quarterback before training camp has taken place. You cannot ignore the process without undermining the competition entirely. Monken is handling this exactly the way a good head coach should handle it. But here is what Monken did not say. He did not express any doubt about Shedeur's ability to hold up under that pressure. He did not suggest that the live contact phase might reveal weaknesses that the offseason program has been concealing. He did not hint that Watson's experience gives him a structural advantage once the intensity level rises. What he said was that the evidence would continue accumulating, that the picture would get clearer, that the competition would play out, and the results would speak for themselves. When a head coach is completely confident in a player, he talks about what is coming as a process of confirmation rather than a test that might go either way. Monken's language about training camp is the language of confirmation. He is not waiting to find out if Shedeur can handle it. He is waiting for the opportunity to show everyone else what he has already been watching in practice. Watson, on the other hand, is entering training camp carrying an enormous weight. He's a 30-year-old quarterback attempting to come back from one of the most devastating injuries a football player can suffer. He is walking into a building where the offensive identity has been redefined in a way that directly conflicts with his natural tendencies. He is competing against a younger, faster processing quarterback who the head coach has been publicly celebrating for months, and he is doing all of this while the entire football world watches and waits for confirmation of something most informed observers already believe. Gabriel is also in that quarterback room, and his presence should not be entirely dismissed. He is a talented player who earned his opportunity. But Monken's public commentary has not focused on Gabriel either. The attention, the specificity, the detail, it has all been directed at one player, and that player is Shedeur. When the pads go on and the real work begins in Cleveland, Shedeur Sanders is not going to be auditioning for a job. He is going to be demonstrating in live competitive situations what the head coach of this team has already seen in practice every single day since the offseason program began. Training camp is not a threat to Shedeur's chances. It is the stage where everyone else finally gets to see what Todd Monken has already been watching. The Browns faithful have been patient. They have endured seasons of disappointment, organizational chaos, and a quarterback situation that became a symbol of everything that can go wrong when an organization chases a solution without examining the cost. That era is over. The blueprint for what comes next has been drawn up by Monken and described publicly in enough detail that the picture is unmistakable. Quick processing, fast release, fearless decision-making, attacking every part of the field without hesitation, owning every outcome without deflection, welcoming the responsibility that comes with controlling an offense at the highest level. That is the quarterback Todd Monken is building this offense around. That is the quarterback Deshaun Sanders spent years developing, and that is the quarterback who is going to walk into training camp in Cleveland and confirm what the head coach already knows. His name is Shedeur Sanders, and everything that is coming next was already written the moment Monken walked up to that podium and told the world exactly what he sees when he watches number 2 operate. The competition is not over, but for anyone paying real attention, it already has a winner. If this breakdown changed how you're seeing this situation, hit like, drop your thoughts below, and subscribe, because this story is only getting bigger from here.